As we arrive at the heart of our journey, we must pause and look back at the road we have traveled, for this is not just another step, but the very framework of the message contained in this book. Chapter 1. Every journey begins with a spark of desire, but the danger lies in starting without knowing the weight of the road ahead. And too often we are quick to announce, quick to commit, and quick to dream loudly, but slow to measure, slow to calculate, and slow to understand what finishing truly demands. And this is why countless people live surrounded by abandoned projects, unfulfilled resolutions, and dusty reminders of things they once started with passion, but never carried to completion. For beginnings are easy. They come with excitement, applause, and a sense of fresh possibility, yet endings demand endurance, patience, and the quiet strength to keep going when no one is watching. And the central truth that must be written on the heart of every man and woman is simple: never start what you cannot finish, because every beginning you fail to carry through becomes a weight on your soul, a testimony against your character, and a shadow that whispers to you in your quiet moments, reminding you of the gap between your words and your actions. And so before you begin any pursuit, you must ask yourself, am I truly ready to pay the price that completion will demand? Do I have the discipline, the vision, the patience, and the willpower to see this through to the end? For it is far better to wait, to prepare, to strengthen your foundations before you commit than to begin with weakness and collapse midway. And life teaches us again and again that those who rush to start without thinking about the finish line often waste not only their energy, but also their credibility, because people begin to see them as unreliable, full of words but empty in results. And while society may celebrate the enthusiasm of starters, it is the finishers who shape history, who build legacies, and who leave behind works that stand the test of time. For anyone can speak of dreams, but only a few transform those dreams into reality through consistent action and unshakable commitment. And so the first principle of this book, the opening foundation, is that starting is not a small decision. It is a covenant, a vow that binds you to the responsibility of seeing it through, and therefore you must weigh it heavily, count the cost, measure the distance, and understand that finishing will require you to sacrifice comfort, to overcome distractions, to silence doubt, and to endure hardship. And in truth, the energy of beginning is like a spark, bright but fragile, and without fuel it dies quickly. And the only fuel strong enough to sustain a spark into a steady flame is discipline, daily choices that may seem small but compound over time, turning fragile hope into unstoppable progress. And this is why you must be careful when you commit, because every commitment is a seed planted in the soil of your future, and unfinished commitments are seeds that grow into regret, self-doubt, and wasted years, whereas finished commitments grow into honor, confidence, and legacy. And so many people live surrounded by the ghosts of unfinished beginnings, diets abandoned after a week, businesses left halfway, relationships broken because the effort to sustain them seemed too heavy, spiritual practices started with zeal and then forgotten when the emotion faded, and each ghost becomes a whisper of weakness that eats at the foundation of their confidence. But you must decide to live differently, to live as one who counts the cost before beginning, who sets fewer goals but pursues them with relentless focus until the end. For this is the mark of wisdom, and the one who practices it becomes like a craftsman who begins no project without first ensuring he has the tools, the time, and the strength to finish it. For a half-built house is not a monument to vision, but a monument to failure. And in the same way, a half-lived dream is not a source of pride but of shame. And so as you hear these words, let them sink deep. Never start what you cannot finish. Never make a vow you cannot keep. Never step on a path you are not willing to walk to the very end. And this does not mean avoiding ambition. No, it means respecting ambition enough to prepare for it, to commit fully and seriously, because true greatness is not measured by how many times you started, but by how many times you finished. And so before you speak of a goal, ask yourself if you are ready to carry the weight of it. Before you declare a dream, ask yourself if you are ready to labor for it when the excitement fades. Before you commit to a relationship, a career, a project, or a spiritual discipline, ask yourself if you are willing to carry it faithfully through the storms, because the storms will come, distractions will arise, fatigue will set in, doubt will whisper, and fear will try to chain you. But if you began with the end in mind, if you began with the seriousness of a finisher, then none of these storms will break you. And so the first and greatest principle of this book is a call to seriousness, a call to weight your steps, to measure your words, to prepare yourself deeply before you take on anything. Because a life full of unfinished beginnings is a life full of wasted energy, but a life of carefully chosen commitments carried faithfully to completion is a life of power, respect, and legacy. And so I tell you once again, never start what you cannot finish. Chapter 2. The world does not remember those who start, it remembers those who finish. For beginnings are common, beginnings are cheap, beginnings are everywhere, but finishing is rare, finishing is costly, and finishing is the mark of true greatness. And this is why history books are filled with the names of those who endured until the end, rather than those who only set out with bold declarations, but quit when the road grew rough. Because there is no glory in an abandoned race, there is no honor in a half-built bridge, and there is no legacy in unfinished work. Yet everywhere you look you find people intoxicated with the thrill of starting, rushing into ventures, relationships, promises, and projects without weighing the burden that comes with them. And they mistake the noise of beginnings for the significance of endings. But the truth is that the crowd celebrates loudly at the start, cheering the runner as he takes his first steps, clapping for the student when she begins her studies, praising the entrepreneur when he launches his idea. But the crowd grows silent as the journey drags on, and only those who press through the silence, through the loneliness, through the hardships, are the ones who will stand at the end and be remembered as finishers. Because starting is an act of enthusiasm, but finishing is an act of endurance, and the human heart loves enthusiasm. It loves the idea of something new. It loves the feeling of progress at the beginning. But when the newness wears off and the grind of persistence sets in, when the early applause fades and you are left with sweat, sacrifice, and sometimes even tears, that is where the line is drawn between the multitude of starters and the small circle of finishers, and you must decide which group you belong to, for 1,000 voices can begin a song, but only a few have the discipline to sing it until the last note, and it is only the last note that gives the song its beauty and completeness, just as it is only the end of a story that gives it meaning. And so it is in life, because no one remembers the many who set out on journeys they abandoned, but all honor the few who cross the line regardless of the obstacles they face. And so this chapter warns you against the temptation of scattered beginnings, against the danger of chasing novelty after novelty, scattering your energy across 100 roads, but never walking any of them to the end, because scattered energy produces no fruit, but focused energy produces completion, and completion is what makes a mark on the world. For starters are dreamers, but finishers are builders. Starters inspire with their words, but finishers inspire with their results. Starters bring excitement, but finishers bring impact. And you must choose whether you will be known as one who merely started or as one who brought something to completion, because there is nothing easier than to say, "I will do this." But there is nothing harder than to say, "I have done this." And that difference is the very essence of human achievement. And too often people mistake the easy comfort of starting for the true work of building. But beginnings are only a door, and many walk through the door, but few remain to construct the house. And so you must cultivate the character of a finisher, which requires you to value patience above passion, commitment above comfort, endurance above excitement. Because passion can start a race, but only patience can carry you to the end. Comfort can make you quit, but commitment will make you continue. Excitement may launch you, but endurance is what will land you at your destination. And if you allow yourself to be among those who start everything and finish nothing, your life will be filled with fragments of dreams, fragments of projects, fragments of relationships, fragments of efforts, and a fragmented life is a weakened life. But if you discipline yourself to finish what you begin, to give yourself fully to fewer things, to dedicate yourself not to the thrill of beginning, but to the satisfaction of completing, then your life will become whole, strong, and respected. For finishers are leelas, trusted. Finishers are followed, because the world longs for those whose word means something, whose actions prove that when they start, they will surely finish. And so this chapter calls you to examine your own record, to look honestly at the trail of your life. Is it full of beginnings abandoned, promises broken, and half-done work? Or is it filled with things carried to the end, things you can point to with pride and say, "I finished that"? And if you find too many abandoned beginnings behind you, then let this be the moment you decide to live differently. Let this be the moment you resolve never again to start without finishing, never again to scatter your strength on countless beginnings, but instead to commit carefully and then endure faithfully, because true honor belongs not to the one who starts, but to the one who finishes. And so I tell you again, the world does not remember starters, it remembers finishers, and the choice to be one or the other is a choice only you can make. CFTR3 discipline is the bridge between the dream and its reality, and without discipline every start is nothing more than a fleeting spark destined to fade into the dark. Because passion may ignite your journey, but only discipline sustains it. Only discipline carries you through the long, silent hours when no one is watching and no applause is given. And so you must understand from the very beginning that dreams are fragile without the structure of discipline. They are like seeds scattered on rocky soil that sprout quickly but wither under the sun. And the tragedy of so many lives is not that they lacked desire, not that they lacked ambition, but that they lacked the daily discipline to nurture those desires into something lasting. And so this chapter is a call to build within yourself the one quality that separates starters from finishers, the one trait that transforms promises into realities, the one habit that will make the difference between regret and legacy. If a discipline is not glamorous, it does not always feel exciting, it is often repetitive, often demanding, often thankless, but it is the slow, steady hammer that shapes raw potential into polished greatness. And without it, no dream survives, because enthusiasm without discipline is like fire without wood. It flares brightly but dies quickly, and so many people confuse their initial passion with lasting strength, thinking that the intensity of their excitement will be enough to carry them. But when the emotional high fades, when the reality of effort sets in, when resistance appears in the form of fatigue, distraction, or failure, they crumble, because passion alone cannot stand. But the disciplined soul remains unmoved, continuing step by step regardless of how he feels, because discipline is not about feeling, it is about choice. The choice to do what must be done whether or not you feel like doing it, the choice to keep going when every part of you whispers to stop. And so if you want to finish what you start, you must build discipline like a soldier builds strength, through daily training, through repeated acts of self-control, through a commitment that does not bend with circumstance. And you must recognize that discipline is not a punishment. It is a gift, for it is the tool that gives you mastery over yourself. It is the power that allows you to say no to distractions, no to laziness, no to temptation, and yes to your higher purpose, yes to your vision, yes to the life you are building. And while many avoid discipline because it feels restrictive, the truth is that discipline is the greatest freedom. because only the disciplined man is free to complete what he chooses, while the undisciplined is a slave to every whim, every mood, every distraction that drags him away from his purpose. And so the paradox is that those who embrace discipline live the freest lives, for they finish, they accomplish, they fulfill, while those who avoid discipline are constantly bound by their own unfinished beginnings, their unkept promises, their wasted time. And if you want to be remembered as one who finishes, you must fall in love with the daily grind, the unseen hours, the repetition that sharpens your mind and strengthens your spirit. And you must stop waiting for motivation to carry you, because motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls like the tide, but discipline is the anchor that holds you steady. And every great man and woman who ever finished something worth remembering was carried not by constant excitement, but by relentless discipline. And so this chapter presses upon you that finishing is not about talent, it is not about luck, it is not about who claps for you at the beginning, it is about who has the discipline to continue when the clapping has stopped, who has the strength to say, "I will do it," and then keep doing it when no one else believes, and when failure knocks on your door, when distraction whispers, when fatigue lays heavy on your shoulders. It is discipline that will answer. It is discipline that will push you to take one more step, one more action, one more day of persistence, and slowly, almost invisibly, these days of discipline pile up into weeks, then into months, and then into years, and before you know it, you are standing at the finish line, not because you always felt like it, but because you refused to let your feelings decide your actions. And so discipline must become your constant companion, your closest ally, and though it will demand sacrifice, though it will call you to rise earlier, to work harder, to say no more often than you say yes, though it will stretch you beyond your comfort, in the end it will give you something priceless, the power to finish, the power to look back and see not fragments of effort, but completed victories. And so I tell you again, never rely on passion alone. Never trust the fleeting energy of beginnings. Instead, build the unshakable foundation of discipline, because only discipline can carry your dream from the spark of imagination to the reality of completion. Only discipline can transform your start into a finish, and only discipline can make you one of the few whose life is not a collection of abandoned attempts, but a testimony of finished work. So embrace it, live it, and let it shape you into the kind of person who always finishes what you begin. CHTR4 Vision is the power to see the end before the beginning, and without vision every journey is a blind stumble into uncertainty, because vision is the light that reveals the path, the compass that keeps you steady, and the anchor that holds you when storms of doubt and distraction press against you. And this is why so many people start, but do not finish, for they begin without a clear picture of where they are going. They set out on roads without knowing the destination. They make promises without seeing the weight of keeping them. And inevitably, when the hardships come, when the journey grows long, they give up, because there was never a strong enough vision to pull them forward. But the finisher sees the end before he takes the first step. The finisher paints the picture of completion in his heart so vividly that it becomes his constant motivation, and even when the road is rough, even when fatigue sets in, even when others doubt him, he keeps walking because his eyes are fixed not on the difficulty of the present, but on the glory of the finish. And you must understand this truth: beginnings without vision are nothing but illusions, exciting in the moment, but empty in substance. Because vision is what transforms a mere idea into a mission, vision is what gives direction to discipline, and vision is what keeps you aligned when distractions tempt you to wander. For if you do not know where you are going, every path will seem attractive, and you will waste your energy chasing distractions. But if your vision is clear, if the end is written firmly in your mind, then no distraction can steal you, no temptation can lure you, and no obstacle can stop you. because vision becomes a fire that burns within, guiding your every step. And so before you start anything in life, you must stop and see it finished in your heart. You must imagine the outcome, the reward, the legacy, because what you cannot see, you cannot achieve. And this is not about daydreaming. It is about clarity, clarity that tells you this is the goal, this is the cost, and this is the path I must take. And once you see it clearly, you begin to live for it. You begin to align your actions, your habits, your relationships, and your decisions with that vision, because the truth is, vision governs everything, and without it you will live scattered, divided and weak, but with it you will live focused, directed and strong. And think of the builder who lays the first stone of a house without a blueprint. What will happen to his work? Surely the house will be crooked, unstable, and doomed to collapse. But the wise builder first sees the entire house in his mind. He draws the plan, he calculates the cost, and only then does he begin. And because of his vision, every stone finds its place, every wall rises with purpose, and the house stands completed and strong. So it is with life. You must have the blueprint of your vision before you lay the first stone of action, because without vision your effort is wasted, your energy scattered, and your dreams abandoned. And vision is not just about success, it is about responsibility. For when you have a clear vision, you become accountable to it. You cannot wander aimlessly, you cannot quit carelessly, because the image of the end pulls you forward. It calls you to rise when you fall, to try again when you fail, and to persist when you are weary. And this is why the strongest finishers are often those with the clearest visions, because vision makes quitting impossible, and even when they stumble, even when the road twists, their eyes remain fixed on the destination, and that inner picture gives them the power to endure. And so if you want to finish what you start, cultivate vision, guard vision, strengthen vision, because it is your shield against despair and your weapon against distraction. And vision must be nurtured daily. It must be fed with reminders, with reflection, with meditation, because if you neglect your vision, it will fade. And a fading vision is as dangerous as no vision at all. But if you keep it alive, if you keep reminding yourself of why you began, of what you seek, of what lies at the finish line, then even when the journey is long and hard, your heart will not faint, and you will keep pressing forward. And so this chapter declares to you that vision is not optional. It is essential, for vision is the map of finishing. Vision is the breath of persistence. Vision is the difference between a dreamer who quits and a finisher who endures. And so I tell you once again, before you start anything, see the end clearly, write it on your heart, let it shape your choices, let it fuel your discipline, let it steady your patience, and let it become the force that carries you across the finish line. Because without vision you will abandon the road, but with vision you will finish strong and live with legacy. CRTR 5. Fear has stopped more people than failure ever has, and if you look carefully at the countless unfinished journeys scattered across the world, you will see that most of them did not end because the person lacked talent, or because the road was too hard, or even because resources were absent, but because fear whispered louder than courage. Fear of the unknown, fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of being judged, fear of not being enough. And when fear enters the heart, it paralyzes the will, it magnifies the obstacles, it makes the mountain seem higher than it is, the river wider than it flows, and the enemy stronger than he truly stands. And so many people quit not because they cannot finish, but because they convince themselves that finishing is impossible. Yet the truth is simple, and eternal fear is a shadow. It has no substance of its own. It only grows when you feed it, and it only shrinks when you confront it. And this is why courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear decide, because every finisher feels fear, every builder, every warrior, every dreamer hears the voice of fear whispering in their ear. But the difference between those who finish And those who abandon their path is not whether fear came, but how they answered it. The quitter listens to fear and obeys, but the finisher listens to fear and still acts, saying, I may feel afraid, but I will not stop. And this is the heart of courage, the steady determination to keep moving even when trembling, the refusal to bow before shadows, the choice to see through fear and walk by faith. And so this chapter speaks to the truth that if you want to finish what you start, you must learn to master fear, not by denying it, not by pretending it does not exist, but by facing it head-on, by exposing it to the light of action. For action is the enemy of fear, movement is the antidote to paralysis, and each step you take against fear makes the next step easier, until eventually fear loses its power over you, and you begin to realize that most of the things you were afraid of were never as big, never as strong, and never as dangerous as they appeared in your imagination. For fear thrives in the mind, but fades in reality, and so you must teach yourself to act before fear grows too loud, to move before hesitation takes root, and to remind yourself constantly that fear cannot stop you unless you give it permission. And the greatest tragedy is that many people give fear permission. They treat fear as a master instead of a liar. They treat it as truth instead of deception, and so they never build the business, never write the book, never pursue the calling, never fight for the relationship, never chase the dream, and years later they sit with regret, realizing that what held them back was never the impossibility of the task, but the chains of fear they wrapped around themselves. But you are called to live differently. You are called to walk as a finisher, and that means you must refuse to allow fear to make your decisions. And every time fear rises, you must rise higher. You must answer it with persistence. You must confront it with faith, because fear shrinks when you face it and grows when you run. And if you practice courage daily, if you face small fears consistently, you will build the strength to face the larger ones when they come, and soon you will find that fear no longer rules you, because courage has become your habit, your instinct, your way of life. And in this way, fear transforms from a wall that blocks you into a teacher that shapes you, because every time you defeat fear, you grow stronger, more confident, and more resilient. And so this chapter declares to you that fear is not the end. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is simply the test, the question that asks, will you stop here, or will you continue? Will you quit, or will you finish? And the finisher always answers the same, I will continue, I will finish, I will not bow to fear. And this is why courage must be your constant companion. For courage is the hand that takes you across the line when fear tries to hold you back. Courage is the voice that says one more step, one more day, one more fight. Courage is the shield that protects your dream from the arrows of doubt and the storms of uncertainty. And though fear will always appear on your path, you must remember it is only a shadow, and shadows cannot harm you. They only look large until the light shines. So carry the light of faith, carry the light of persistence, carry the light of action, and fear will scatter. And when you finally finish what you began, you will look back and realize that fear was never the mountain you thought it was. It was only the mist that tried to hide the mountain. And once you stepped through, you saw clearly that finishing was always within your reach. So never let fear stop you. Never let fear silence you. Never let fear dictate your story, for fear is temporary, but regret is forever. And only courage can carry you to the end where your victory, your honor, and your legacy await. Chapter 6. Regret is the heavy chain of unfinished work, and it clings to the heart far longer than failure ever will. Because failure, when faced with courage, can become a lesson. It can be turned into wisdom. It can be used as fuel to grow stronger. But regret lingers like a shadow that never leaves, whispering reminders of the things you could have finished, the dreams you abandoned, the promises you broke, and the potential you never fulfilled. And if you look at the lives of so many people, you will find that their greatest pain is not what they attempted and failed, but what they started and did not finish, the jobs left incomplete, the words left unsaid, the commitments left unkept, and these unfinished pieces of life pile up like stones on the back of the soul, weighing down the spirit and stealing joy, because every unfinished task is not just a project undone, it is a part of yourself left incomplete, a fragment of your destiny that never reached its fulfillment, and over time these fragments create a landscape of regret, and regret is merciless. It robs you of peace in the present, and it robs you of confidence in the future. Because once you allow yourself to quit too often, you begin to doubt your own word, you begin to mistrust your own strength, and you begin to believe the lie that you are not capable of finishing anything. And this self-doubt becomes a prison, and many people live trapped inside it, never daring to try again, because they are haunted by the ghosts of what they left undone. But the truth is that regret is not inevitable. It is a choice, for regret comes only when you abandon what you could have carried to completion. Regret comes when you start without seriousness, when you commit without vision, when you make promises without discipline. But if you learn to finish what you begin, you will not live with regret, you will live with honor. Because finished work gives peace, it gives satisfaction, it gives you the confidence to stand tall and know that your word is strong, your actions are true, and your legacy is intact. And so this chapter calls you to understand the danger of regret, to see it not as something that happens at the end of life, but as something that grows little by little every time you quit, every time you abandon, every time you allow yourself to leave something half done. And this is why you must treat every commitment as sacred, every beginning as serious, because if you do not, regret will multiply, and the weight of regret will make it harder and harder for you to ever finish anything. But if you break the cycle, if you choose from this day forward to finish what you start, you can silence regret, you can replace it with pride, with joy, with peace, and with legacy, because the opposite of regret is not success, it is completion, for success is often measured by the world, by numbers, by applause, by recognition, but completion is measured within. It is the deep satisfaction of knowing you carried something faithfully to the end, and even if the world never claps, even if no one else notices, you will sleep with peace, because you know you did not leave it undone, and that peace is priceless. And so many people live restless because of regret. Their nights are filled with thoughts of what could have been. Their hearts are filled with sorrow for what they abandoned. But the finisher sleeps in peace. The finisher walks with dignity, because his life is not haunted by fragments but crowned with completions. And so I urge you, never let regret be your master. Never give it the power to write your story. And the way to defeat regret is simple, though not easy. Finish what you start, commit carefully, and endure faithfully. And if you stumble, if you fail, do not abandon, rise again, continue, because failure that leads to learning is not regret, but quitting is. And this is the difference you must engrave in your heart. And when you understand it, you will no longer fear failure, but you will fear regret, and that fear will drive you to persevere, to persist, to keep walking until you reach the end, because regret is permanent, but failure is temporary. And so you must live with the mindset of a finisher, reminding yourself daily that unfinished work becomes tomorrow's sorrow, but completed work becomes tomorrow's joy. And if you want to live free, if you want to live strong, if you want to live with peace, then finish what you start, because only then will regret lose its grip on your life. Only then will you look back and see a life not of fragments and shadows, but of wholeness and light. And that is the life of true freedom, the life of true honor, the life of the finisher. CPTR 7. Commitment is the bridge between intention and reality, the invisible force that carries dreams from the realm of thought into the world of action. And without commitment, even the most brilliant ideas dissolve into nothing, because the truth is that desire may ignite the spark, vision may paint the picture, and motivation may push you to begin, but only commitment has the power to keep you moving when the fire grows dim, when the road grows long, and when the burden feels heavier than you expected. And so in this chapter we must understand that commitment is not a feeling, but a decision, not an emotion that rises and falls with circumstance, but a choice you make and hold regardless of what comes. For too many people confuse motivation with commitment, believing that as long as they feel inspired they will keep moving. But inspiration is a visitor, and it does not stay. It knocks on your door occasionally, and if you rely only on its presence you will quit as soon as it leaves. But commitment is a resident. It is the anchor that holds you firm even when storms rise. It is the vow that keeps you rooted when your emotions betray you. And it is the discipline that reminds you of why you started when you can no longer remember the thrill of beginning. And this is why so many dreams die young, because people start with passion but lack commitment. They want the crown but are unwilling to carry the cross. They want the destination but do not endure the journey. And the result is a graveyard of unfinished tasks, abandoned projects, and promises broken both to themselves and to others. But when you understand the sacredness of commitment, you rise above this pattern. You begin to see that every yes you speak is a bond, every pledge you make is a responsibility, and every beginning carries with it the moral duty to finish, because the essence of honor is not in what you desire, but in what you endure. And so commitment is not about perfection, but about perseverance. It is not about never stumbling, but about never surrendering. It is the quiet strength that whispers, "Keep going," when everything inside you screams, "Quit." And if you master the art of commitment, you will find that success follows naturally, for the world does not reward those who start often and quit quickly. It rewards those who finish faithfully, those who remain steady when others grow weary, those who show up day after day, even when the applause has faded and the crowd has left, because finishing is rare, and that rarity gives it value, and commitment is the soil in which finishing grows. So if you want to live a life without regret, if you want to see your vision come to reality, you must cultivate commitment. And you cultivate it not by waiting for the right feeling, but by practicing the right choices, by training yourself to honor your word, by reminding yourself daily that beginnings are cheap, but endings are priceless, and that anyone can say, "I will," but few can truly say, "I did." And you must ask yourself which voice you want to echo in your story. Do you want to be remembered as someone who always intended but never completed, or as someone who committed and carried it through? And the difference lies not in talent, not in luck, not in resources, but in the unshakable decision to stay when it is hard, to work when it is dull, to rise when you have fallen, and to continue until it is done. And this is the essence of Chapter 7, the reminder that commitment is the power that separates the dreamer from the doer, the starter from the finisher, and the ordinary from the extraordinary, because commitment is what gives weight to your words. It is what gives credibility to your character, and it is what gives meaning to your efforts. And so you must guard your commitments. Do not speak lightly. Do not promise carelessly. For every commitment you make becomes a part of your integrity, and every time you finish what you began, you strengthen your own belief in yourself. But every time you quit, you weaken that belief. And so your commitments are not only about others, but about your own identity. For you are defined not by what you planned, but by what you persevered in, not by what you imagined, but by what you endured. And this is why you must never start what you cannot finish, because commitment is not about endless beginnings, but about faithful endings. And once you embrace this truth, your life will no longer be scattered with fragments of what might have been, but built upon the solid ground of what has been completed. And that is the gift of commitment. It transforms dreams into history, intentions into legacies, and possibilities into realities. Chapter 8. Discipline is the silent architect of every finished work, the invisible hand that shapes scattered effort into lasting achievement. And without discipline, no vision, no matter how grand, can survive the tests of time, because discipline is not the burst of energy at the beginning of a journey. It is the steady rhythm that keeps you moving when motivation disappears. It is the quiet habit that whispers to you at dawn when your body wants to stay in bed. It is the inner command that says, "Show up," even when no one is watching. And it is the anchor that holds you to your purpose when distractions pull at your every side. And so in this chapter we must understand that discipline is not punishment, nor is it restriction. It is the purest form of freedom, because when you are disciplined, you are free from the chains of inconsistency, free from the slavery of procrastination, and free from the regret of unfinished work. But when you lack discipline, you are tossed like a leaf in the wind, starting 100 things but finishing none, dreaming loudly but building nothing, hoping endlessly but reaping little. And in this lies the greatest tragedy of undisciplined living, for without discipline talent is wasted, potential is buried, and ambition is reduced to a whisper of what could have been. And so to live a life of finishing, to live a life where your word becomes action and your action becomes legacy, you must embrace discipline not as a guest, but as a companion, not as an occasional practice, but as a daily rule, because discipline is not something you visit when convenient. It is a home you must dwell in, and once you begin to dwell in it, you discover that discipline, though it feels hard in the beginning, becomes the very thing that makes life easier, because when you are disciplined, you do not waste energy in constant decision making. You no longer debate with yourself every day whether to act. You simply act. You no longer argue with yourself whether to continue. You simply continue, and in that simplicity lies power, because the undisciplined person fights 1,000 battles in his own mind and loses most of them. But the disciplined person wins the battle once, and then builds victory upon victory. And this is why discipline must be understood not as something external, but as something internal. For it does not depend on the applause of others. It does not wait for someone to remind you. It comes from the vow you make to yourself and the promise you refuse to break. And the most disciplined people are not always the most talented, but they are always the most trusted, because trust is built not on ability, but on consistency, and consistency is the fruit of discipline. And so when we say, "Never start what you cannot finish," we are not only speaking of commitment, but also of discipline, because commitment gives you the will to begin, but discipline gives you the strength to endure. Commitment declares your intention, but discipline proves your seriousness. Commitment shines in words, but discipline shines in actions. And when the two walk together, nothing can stop you from finishing what you started. But when one is absent, the other stumbles, because commitment without discipline becomes empty passion, and discipline without commitment becomes lifeless routine. But together they create unstoppable progress, and discipline especially has the unique ability to transform your character, because every act of discipline is a reminder that you are stronger than your feelings, wiser than your impulses, and greater than your excuses. And when you live with discipline, you begin to trust yourself in ways that others cannot. You begin to look in the mirror and see a person who does not merely dream but delivers, who does not merely talk but acts, who does not merely plan but produces, and that self-trust becomes the foundation of confidence. Because confidence is not built by empty affirmations, but by consistent evidence that you can rely on yourself. And this evidence comes only through discipline. And so in this chapter we must also understand that discipline is not a gift given to a few. It is a choice available to all. For every day you are given countless small opportunities to practice discipline, to choose the long term over the short term, to choose the necessary over the easy, to choose the lasting over the temporary. And every choice you make strengthens either your discipline or your weakness. And this is why discipline grows like a muscle. It grows through practice. It grows through repetition. It grows through the daily refusal to surrender to comfort. And just as a muscle becomes stronger with resistance, your discipline becomes stronger with every temptation resisted, with every excuse denied, and with every action taken even when you did not feel like taking it. And soon you realize that discipline is no longer something you must fight for. It becomes part of who you are. It becomes the lens through which you see your goals and the strength through which you accomplish them. And so in this chapter we arrive at the truth that if you want to finish what you start, you cannot rely on excitement. You cannot rely on passion alone. You must build the fortress of discipline around your life. For without it you will always begin, but never complete. You will always aim, but never strike. You will always hope, but never harvest. But with it you will rise above the crowd of quitters. You will join the rare league of finishers, and your life will no longer be filled with broken attempts, but with completed journeys. And that is the lasting reward of discipline, the power to see through to the end what others abandoned in the middle, the power to build what others only imagined, and the power to finish faithfully what you began with hope. Sapti 9 Patience is the unseen strength that carries every dream from seed to harvest, the quiet force that allows you to endure the waiting season without losing heart, and without patience no great work can be completed. Because the journey of finishing is rarely fast, it is often long, winding, and filled with delays, obstacles, and silent stretches where nothing seems to move. And it is in these silent stretches that many abandon their goals, not because they lacked talent or even discipline, but because they could not endure the wait. They grew weary in the in-between. They mistook silence for failure. They mistook delay for denial. And they allowed impatience to destroy what patience would have delivered. And so in this chapter we learn that patience is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is not simply sitting still and hoping for change. But patience is the active endurance of time. It is the refusal to give up when progress is slow. It is the determination to hold your course when results are not yet visible. It is the wisdom to know that fruit takes time to ripen, foundations take time to settle, and great works take time to build. And patience gives you the courage to remain steadfast during the hidden seasons of preparation, because every dream has its season of hiddenness, the time when no one sees, no one applauds, and no one even believes in what you are building. But patience reminds you that just because no one else sees, it does not mean the work is wasted. And just because you have not yet arrived, it does not mean you will not arrive. And so patience teaches you to trust the process, to respect the timeline, and to believe that every moment of waiting is shaping you for the finish. Because the truth is, waiting is not empty. Waiting is a classroom where character is formed, where strength is built, where endurance is tested, and where the vision is purified. And those who rush the process often end up breaking under the weight of success they were not ready for, while those who practice patience grow into the kind of people who can carry the blessing when it finally comes. And so patience is not only about waiting for the goal, but also about becoming worthy of the goal. And this is why patience must be embraced as a partner in every journey, because without patience, discipline will eventually crack. Without patience, motivation will burn out, and without patience, your dream will die in the soil before it ever has a chance to see the sun. But with patience you can outlast doubt, outlast criticism, and outlast the trials that come against you, because patience is stronger than impatience. It does not panic when others do. It does not quit when others do. It does not run when storms rise. It stands, it endures, it holds its ground, and it waits with strength. And in this waiting you gain something far greater than what you desire. You gain resilience, because every delay you survive makes you harder to break. Every trial you endure makes you wiser, and every season of waiting teaches you the priceless lesson that timing matters, because to start and not finish is a tragedy, but to finish at the wrong time is also a tragedy, and patience protects you from both, teaching you to start when ready and to finish when complete. And so when we say never start what you cannot finish, we must also say never finish before the time is right, because a rushed ending is no better than an abandoned journey, and patience guards you against the temptation to rush. And this is where so many fail, because they confuse speed with progress, they confuse hurry with success, and they confuse movement with growth. But patience teaches you that slow progress is still progress, that steady movement is better than quick collapse, and that a finished work built over time is always greater than a hurried work that falls apart. And so the power of patience lies not only in waiting, but in what you become while you wait. For patience teaches humility, because you realize that the world will not bend to your timeline. Patience teaches faith, because you must believe even when nothing is happening. Patience teaches endurance, because you must keep going even when the road feels endless. And patience teaches gratitude, because when the result finally comes you value it more deeply for the time it took. And so patience is not only a virtue but a necessity for finishing. And the lack of patience is one of the chief reasons why so many dreams remain half-built, why so many projects are abandoned, and why so many lives are filled with regret. But when you embrace patience, you align yourself with the reality that great things take time, and by doing so you position yourself among the few who not only start but finish, who not only dream but achieve, and who not only hope but harvest, because they did not faint in the waiting, they did not give up in the silence, and they did not rush the ending, but they trusted the process, they endured the wait, and they received the reward. And this is why patience is not weakness, it is strength under control, it is hope with endurance, it is vision with timing, and it is the golden thread that ties beginnings to endings, making sure that what you started with excitement is finished with excellence, and what you carried with discipline is crowned with reward. Chapter 10. Commitment is the backbone of every lasting achievement, the unshakable force that holds you steady when everything else tries to push you off course. And in truth, commitment is the invisible line that separates the dreamers from the doers, because many can dream, many can desire, and many can start with excitement, but only the committed can endure until the end. And without commitment, no journey, no relationship, no career, no goal can be sustained. For commitment is not simply a promise spoken with lips, it is a vow engraved in the heart. It is a decision that binds you not only when the road is easy, but also when it is unbearable. And commitment is the daily choice to stay true to your path, even when the fire of passion has cooled, and the applause of others has faded, because passion can ignite you, but only commitment can sustain you. And this is why so many begin, but never finish. They relied on feelings instead of vows, they relied on moods instead of decisions, and when the emotions shifted, their efforts collapsed. But commitment is not emotional. Commitment is not dependent on excitement. Commitment is a covenant with yourself, a pledge that says no matter what comes, I will see this through. I will not abandon what I have started. I will not betray the vision I once believed in. And this is why the power of commitment cannot be overstated, because it is the anchor that holds the ship through the storm, the glue that keeps the broken pieces together until they are restored, and the fire that refuses to die out no matter how strong the wind blows. And in life you will see that the absence of commitment is the root cause of most failures, broken dreams, and shattered goals. Because without commitment, every challenge becomes an excuse to quit, every obstacle becomes an escape route, and every delay becomes a reason to abandon the journey. But when commitment is strong, the same challenges that cause others to give up become fuel for your determination. because commitment transforms obstacles into stepping stones, it transforms delays into lessons, and it transforms pain into proof of endurance. And this is why people who are deeply committed may bend, but they never break. They may stumble, but they always rise. And they may be wounded, but they never walk away, because their hearts are bound to the mission, and they cannot imagine betraying the work they started. And so the question must be asked, what is true commitment? And how do we live it? And the answer is simple yet difficult. True commitment is giving yourself no option to quit, removing the exit doors, burning the bridges behind you, and telling yourself that forward is the only direction. And though this sounds radical, it is the only way to ensure that you do not retreat when hardship comes, because every goal worth pursuing will test you, every dream worth building will break you down before it builds you up, and every purpose worth living will demand more of you than you think you can give. And without commitment, you will walk away, but with commitment you will stand, because commitment gives you resilience, it gives you endurance, and it gives you the power to outlast every trial. And in the course of this book, we have said again and again, never start what you cannot finish. And here commitment is the very key to that finishing. For if you do not commit with your whole heart, you will never finish. You will always stop halfway. But if your heart is bound with unshakable commitment, you will finish, no matter how long it takes, no matter how painful it becomes, because commitment transforms your journey into a vow, and a vow into a destiny. And so we must understand that commitment is not just about finishing what we start, but also about who we become in the process, because a committed person becomes trustworthy, reliable, and strong. They become the kind of person others can lean on, the kind of person others respect, because their yes means yes and their no means no. And in a world full of half-kept promises, a committed life shines like a beacon of integrity, and this integrity is priceless, because it builds credibility, it builds honor, and it builds legacy. And legacy is only built by those who were committed long after the applause faded, because applause cannot keep you, but commitment can. And so in this chapter the message is clear. If you desire to be among the few who finish, you must embrace commitment as a lifestyle, not as a feeling. You must chain yourself to the mission you believe in, not in a way that suffocates, but in a way that liberates you from the temptation of quitting. And in doing so you will discover that commitment is not a prison, but a path to freedom. Because once you decide never to quit, you are freed from the torment of indecision, freed from the weight of doubt, freed from the endless cycle of starting and stopping, and you walk with clarity, knowing that you will finish what you start, knowing that you will keep your word, and knowing that no matter what storms may rise, your heart is anchored to the vow you made, and that vow will carry you to the end, because commitment is the difference between those who merely lived and those who left a mark, between those who spoke and those who acted, and between those who began and those who finished. And so let this chapter be engraved upon your heart. Never start without commitment. Never begin without binding your heart to the end, and never take a step without vowing that you will walk all the way, because commitment is the essence of finishing, and finishing is the essence of living with honor. Chapter 11. Discipline is the silent architect of success, the unseen hand that builds the bridge between vision and reality. And while talent can open doors and inspiration can ignite the flame, it is discipline that keeps the fire burning long after the initial spark fades. Because discipline is not glamorous, it is not celebrated, and it rarely feels pleasant in the moment. But it is the daily practice of doing what must be done, even when you do not feel like doing it. And in truth, discipline is the great separator, the dividing line between those who dream endlessly and those who turn their dreams into tangible results. For everyone desires to succeed, and everyone wants to achieve, and everyone imagines a life of fulfillment. but very few are willing to pay the price of discipline, because discipline demands sacrifice, discipline demands consistency, and discipline demands that you say no to what is easy, so that you can say yes to what is lasting. And when we say never start what you cannot finish, discipline becomes the very fuel that carries you from beginning to end, because no matter how committed you are, without the structure of discipline, your commitment will crumble under the weight of distractions, temptations, and excuses. For commitment is the promise, but discipline is the practice. Commitment is the declaration, but discipline is the demonstration. And you cannot finish without both, because discipline takes your lofty dreams and translates them into daily habits, into repeated actions, into small victories that accumulate into great triumphs. And this is why history remembers not only the dreamers but the disciplined doers, those who rose early when others slept, those who practiced in silence while others celebrated, those who endured repetition without applause, because they knew discipline was the price of greatness. And when you look closely, you will realize that discipline is never about one massive act of effort. It is about the 1,000 unseen choices, the daily decisions to stay on course, the refusal to be ruled by emotions, and the ability to act not because you feel like it, but because you must. And this is where many fail, because they live their lives as slaves to their feelings. They wake only when they feel inspired. They work only when they feel motivated. They practice only when they feel strong. And as a result, they remain stuck in mediocrity, because feelings are unstable and unreliable. But discipline is steadfast. Discipline does not ask how you feel. Discipline tells you what to do regardless. And in time, discipline builds strength, it builds resilience, and it builds character, because every act of discipline is a battle won over weakness, a victory over procrastination, and a declaration that you are in control of yourself. Not your impulses, not your desires, not your excuses, but your truest and highest self. And in this sense, discipline is freedom. Because when you discipline yourself, you free yourself from the chains of laziness, distraction, and regret. And you walk the path of clarity and progress, because discipline allows you to trust yourself, to believe in your ability to finish, because you know that you will show up, you will endure, you will do what must be done. And this trust is powerful, because it builds confidence, it builds reliability, and it builds results. And so discipline is not just about success in goals, it is about who you become. Because a disciplined person is dependable, steady, and powerful. They are not swayed by every distraction or temptation. They are rooted, and in a world filled with inconsistency, a disciplined life shines as a beacon of strength. And this is why discipline is the foundation of mastery, because you cannot master anything without repetition, without consistency, without the ability to practice long after the novelty has worn off. And mastery is only given to the disciplined, because talent without discipline flays, but discipline without talent still produces progress, and often even surpasses natural talent. Because while talent can give you a head start, discipline ensures you finish. And when you consider finishing, you realize that discipline is not optional, it is necessary. And every great finisher has been a disciplined soul, from athletes who train relentlessly to artists who practice daily to leaders who sharpen themselves continually, because discipline is the universal language of achievement. And if you want to leave a mark, you must speak that language fluently. And the beauty of discipline is that it is not reserved for the gifted. It is available to all. It is a choice. It is a practice. It is a daily decision that anyone can embrace. And though it begins with difficulty, it always ends with reward, because discipline compounds over time. Small daily efforts accumulate into massive results. And the disciplined person, though they may seem ordinary today, becomes extraordinary tomorrow, because discipline has transformed their potential into performance, their dreams into achievements, and their intentions into reality. And so in this chapter the truth is clear. If you wish to finish, You must clothe yourself in discipline. You must live by discipline. You must practice discipline until it becomes your identity, because it is not enough to start strong. It is not enough to commit in words. It is the disciplined action that will carry you through, that will sustain you when the journey grows long, and that will secure your place among the finishers. And so let discipline not be a burden but a blessing, not a punishment but a path to freedom. Because when you live with discipline, you are free to finish, free to succeed, and free to live with no regrets, knowing you gave your best every day, and that you never abandoned what you started. Tier 12 patience is the quiet strength that sustains discipline, the steady companion that walks alongside commitment, and the hidden ingredient that transforms perseverance into eventual victory. Because without patience, no journey can be completed, no process can be trusted, and no dream can fully mature, for everything worth finishing takes time, and in a world addicted to speed, convenience, and instant gratification, patience has become one of the rarest virtues. Yet it remains one of the most powerful, because patience allows you to endure the waiting seasons without abandoning your purpose, to embrace the process without despising its pace, and to trust that progress is happening even when it is invisible to the eye. And this is why many start with excitement, but fail to finish, because they lack patience. They cannot wait for the seed to break through the soil. They dig up the ground too soon. They abandon the race when the finish line is still beyond their sight, forgetting that greatness always takes time, and that rushing the process only sabotages the outcome. And when we speak of never starting what you cannot finish, patience becomes the breath that keeps you alive in the middle, in the long stretch between beginning and end, because it is in the middle that most people quit, when the initial excitement has faded, but the reward has not yet appeared, when the effort feels endless and the results feel distant, and in that space patience whispers, keep going, keep trusting, keep enduring, for though the harvest has not yet come, it surely will. And patience is not passive, it is active waiting, it is steady persistence. It is the ability to keep sowing, keep building, keep striving without demanding immediate reward, because patience understands that time is a partner, not an enemy, and that some things simply cannot be rushed, because a rushed outcome is often a ruined outcome, and patience teaches you to value the process as much as the product, because who you are becoming in the waiting is just as important as what you are working toward. And in fact, patience is the soil where character grows, because when you learn to wait well, you also learn to grow strong, resilient, and wise. And patience protects you from impulsive decisions that lead to regret, because impatience demands shortcuts, but shortcuts often cut short the journey itself. And this is why patience is not weakness but wisdom. It is not laziness but strength, because it takes far greater power to wait with faith than to quit in frustration. And when you practice patience, you learn to align with timing, with seasons, and with the natural rhythm of life, because everything has its appointed time. The seed has its time to sprout, the fruit has its time to ripen, the dream has its time to be revealed, and to demand it sooner is to sabotage the very promise you seek. And yet patience is not about doing nothing. It is about doing the right things consistently while trusting the process. It is about knowing that consistency is planting and patience is waiting for the growth, and together they guarantee the harvest. And many fail not because they lacked talent or even discipline, but because they lacked patience, because they wanted results faster than they were ready to receive them. And when the results delayed, they abandoned the path, not realizing that quitting only delays the dream further, because if you leave the path, you must start all over again. And so patience is in fact the fastest way to the finish line, because though it feels slow, it ensures you keep moving, it ensures you do not abandon, and it ensures you finally arrive, while impatience may promise speed, but often delivers failure. And so patience is a finisher's virtue, a steadying power that allows you to hold on when everything in you wants to let go. And patience is the guardian of hope, because hope without patience will fade, but hope with patience will endure. And patience allows you to believe that delays are not denials, that obstacles are not endings, and that waiting is not wasting, but rather shaping, forming, and preparing you for the fullness of what is to come. And if you learn patience, you will not only finish what you start, but you will finish well, without bitterness, without regret, and without losing yourself in the process, because patience keeps your heart steady, your mind clear, and your spirit strong. And when you finally reach the finish line, you will see that patience was never empty waiting but active growth. The season where your roots went deeper, your faith grew stronger, and your character was refined. And you will understand that the journey was not just about the destination, but about who you became along the way. And patience was the unseen hand shaping you into the person worthy of the prize. And so patience is not optional for those who would finish. It is essential. It is the quiet fire that fuels endurance, the steady hand that holds you through trials, and the silent promise that what you are working for is already on its way, if only you do not give up too soon. Because patience ensures that when you finally receive it, you will be ready, mature, and capable of handling it. And so let patience be your companion, your teacher, and your strength. For with patience you will finish what you start, and without it you will abandon before the victory is revealed. Chapter 13. Resilience is the ability to rise again after every fall, to rebuild after every loss, to press forward when everything in you screams to stop, and to keep believing when the circumstances around you give you every reason to quit. And resilience is not simply about being tough or unbreakable, but about being flexible enough to bend without snapping, about being strong enough to endure the weight of life without letting it crush you. Because no matter how carefully you plan, how passionately you start, or how committed you remain, life will test you with unexpected storms, setbacks, and disappointments. And in those moments, discipline alone may not feel enough. Motivation may vanish, and even patience may be stretched thin. But resilience is what allows you to keep standing when the winds blow hardest. Resilience is the secret power that separates finishers from quitters, because the truth is you will fall, you will stumble, and you will face failures, but resilience turns those failures into lessons instead of prisons. Resilience takes the blow and turns it into fuel, and the more resilient you become, the less you fear difficulty, because you know you have already survived before, and you can survive again. And resilience is not built in comfort, but in challenge, not in ease, but in hardship, because just as muscles only grow through resistance, so too does resilience only grow through adversity. And those who run from struggle never learn resilience. But those who embrace the struggle become unshakable, because resilience teaches you that the path to finishing anything meaningful will never be smooth. There will always be obstacles, critics, setbacks, and delays, but the resilient refuse to let these stop them. They adapt, they adjust, they recover, and they rise again, because resilience is not about never falling, but about always rising. And resilience is fueled by perspective, because when you learn to see obstacles as opportunities, delays as preparation, and failures as lessons, you no longer fear them. Instead, you harness them. And resilience also comes from faith, the deep inner conviction that your story is not over simply because you face resistance, that the process still matters even when progress is hidden, that the finish line is still ahead even when you cannot see it. And resilience is often the dividing line between those who finish strong and those who quit. Because talent will not always save you, intelligence will not always rescue you, and even strategy may fail you. But resilience, the ability to keep going when everything is against you, will always carry you further than you thought possible. And it is resilience that makes history out of ordinary lives. Resilience that creates leaders out of those who once felt broken, and resilience that turns suffering into strength, because life is not about avoiding pain, but about learning how to rise in spite of it. And the resilient learn to transform scars into stories, losses into wisdom, and pain into power. And this is why resilience is essential to the principle of never starting what you cannot finish. Because without resilience, the middle will break you, but with resilience, the middle will shape you, and resilience gives you the courage to keep walking when the path grows dark, the determination to keep climbing when the mountain grows steep, and the endurance to keep fighting when the battle grows long. And resilience is born out of the conviction that quitting is not an option, that surrender is not the answer, that the only way forward is through. And resilience gives you not just the strength to endure, but the creativity to adapt, because resilience is not stubbornness but flexibility, not denial but determination. And those who cultivate resilience discover that every storm passes, every wound heals, every night eventually gives way to morning, and they live with the quiet confidence that no matter what comes, they will rise again. And resilience is not a gift but a choice to keep showing up, to keep trying, to keep believing even when it hurts, even when it seems pointless, even when others give up. And resilience is a decision you make daily, to not allow hardship to define you, to not allow failure to end you, but to use every blow as a stepping stone to greater strength. And resilience allows you to finish, not because the journey became easier, but because you became stronger, not because the mountain grew smaller, but because your legs grew stronger in the climb. And this is why resilience is the essence of finishing, because resilience whispers to you when no one else does. Resilience tells you to try again when you have failed 100 times. Resilience reminds you that your story is not over, and resilience ensures that you are not defeated by the very challenges that were meant to shape you. And so the truth is, resilience is not an accessory to finishing, it is the foundation. It is the power that keeps the fire burning when the fuel seems gone. It is the anchor that keeps you steady when the storms rage. It is the compass that points you back to the path when you have wandered off course. And it is the reason you will look back one day not with regret but with pride, because though you were knocked down, though you were wounded, though you were tempted to quit, you did not stay down, you did not surrender, you did not abandon, and because of resilience you finished, you endured, you overcame, and you proved to yourself that strength is not measured by how often you avoid falling, but by how often you choose to rise again. CHPR 14 Vision is the ability to see beyond what is, to imagine what could be, to picture in your heart and mind a reality that does not yet exist, but compels you to move toward it with determination. And vision is more than a dream or a fleeting wish. It is a guiding light, a north star, a compass that keeps you aligned even when the road twists and turns. And without vision, people drift. They wander without direction. They start things with no clarity of why and quickly abandon them when challenges rise. But with vision, even the greatest obstacles become stepping stones, because vision gives meaning to effort, purpose to struggle, and energy to persistence. And living is what separates those who merely exist from those who truly live, because life without vision is like sailing without a destination. You may float, you may move, but you will never arrive where you were meant to be. And vision is not just seeing what you want, but also why you want it, because a shallow vision rooted only in comfort or vanity quickly collapses, but a vision rooted in purpose endures storms, survives setbacks, and inspires not only you but those around you. And the truth is, no one finishes anything of significance without vision, because vision paints the finish line in your mind long before you cross it with your feet. And vision is not reserved for leaders, inventors, or dreamers, but for every person who dares to live intentionally, for every parent raising children with values, for every worker showing up to build something that lasts, for every student striving for excellence, for every believer holding on to faith, because vision breathes life into the ordinary and transforms it into the extraordinary, and vision has power because it shapes your choices, influences your habits, and directs your energy. And when your vision is clear, distractions lose their pull, temptations lose their grip, and fear loses its voice, because you cannot be easily swayed when you know where you are going. And vision also fuels resilience, because when setbacks knock you down, it is vision that helps you rise, reminding you why you started, reminding you what is still at stake, and reminding you that the temporary pain is worth the permanent reward. And vision is not only for the future, but also for the present, because vision allows you to see value in the process, beauty in the small steps, and significance in the unseen. And vision allows you to endure criticism because you are not living for the approval of the moment, but for the reality of the future. And vision allows you to make sacrifices that others call foolish because you see something they do not. And vision allows you to stand alone if necessary, because the clarity of your sight is greater than the noise of their doubt. And vision has a way of pulling you forward even when your strength feels gone, because vision whispers to you of a tomorrow worth fighting for, a future worth building, and a legacy worth leaving. And vision also multiplies when shared, because when you carry a strong vision, others begin to catch it, others begin to align with it, and suddenly your personal vision grows into a collective force, creating movements, shaping communities, changing cultures, and rewriting histories. And vision requires courage, because it often demands you to step beyond what is familiar, to risk being misunderstood, to walk where no one has walked. But courage tied to vision produces innovation, transformation, and greatness. And vision is not static but alive. It grows as you grow, it deepens as you mature, and it sharpens as you endure. Because sometimes your early vision is incomplete, and it takes experience, failure, and time to clarify what truly matters. And vision requires discipline, because without discipline, vision remains a dream. Without action, vision dies in imagination. But when vision and discipline unite, they produce unstoppable momentum, carrying you forward even when you face resistance. And vision is often tested in silence, when nothing seems to move, when progress seems invisible. But it is in those moments that vision keeps you steady, holding on to what you know is coming even when you cannot yet see it with your eyes. And vision also requires faith, because every vision involves uncertainty. Every vision requires you to step into the unknown, and every vision asks you to believe in what is unseen until it becomes seen. And those who lack vision become slaves to circumstance, tossed about by the winds. With vision, become masters of direction, steering their lives with intention, no matter the storms. And vision is the foundation of finishing well, because when you see the end from the beginning, you are less likely to quit in the middle. When you have clarity of purpose, you will endure the pressure of process. And when you keep your eyes fixed on the vision, you will not be distracted by the temporary setbacks along the way. And so vision is not optional, but essential if you are to live a life of meaning, if you are to start what you can finish. Because without vision, the start is shallow, the middle is aimless, and the end is abandoned. But with vision, the start is strong, the middle is endured, and the end is achieved. And vision is the silent force that shapes destinies, the invisible fire that fuels persistence, and the divine gift that allows humanity to turn possibility into reality. And if you want to finish what you start, you must first see what you seek. You must hold in your heart a vision so clear, so strong, and so compelling that nothing, not fear, not failure, not fatigue, can take it from you. Because vision is the seed of greatness, the blueprint of achievement, and the story your life is waiting to write. See Chapter 15. Finishing is the crown of all effort, the true mark of discipline, the evidence of commitment, and the difference between those who dream and those who achieve. Because starting is easy, Beginning requires little more than enthusiasm or excitement, but finishing requires endurance, patience, resilience, and focus, and life itself honors finishers, not just starters. For a race is not remembered by how quickly the runners left the starting line, but by who crossed the finish line, and in the same way, your legacy is not defined by the number of things you attempted, but by the weight and meaning of what you completed. Because unfinished goals, abandoned projects, and half-built lives scatter like debris across history, but those who choose to finish stand as monuments of perseverance. And finishing is not about perfection, but about consistency, about choosing to stay the course, even when the journey no longer feels exciting, about holding firm to your word when distractions tempt you away, about pushing forward when fatigue whispers to quit. And finishing requires you to remember your why, because when the pain of the process grows heavier than the thrill of the beginning, only a clear and strong purpose can carry you through, and finishing demands sacrifice, because to complete something of value often requires you to say no to comfort, no to shortcuts, no to laziness, and sometimes even no to good things, so that you may say yes to the best thing. And finishing teaches you patience, because great achievements are rarely instant. They are forged in seasons of waiting, of steady labor, of unseen effort, and finishing reveals character, because while many can begin with enthusiasm, only those of depth, grit, and integrity endure to the end, and finishing is a choice made daily, not just a single moment of triumph, because every day you choose to keep going, every day you decide to stay faithful to the work, and every day you build the momentum that eventually carries you across the line. And finishing is not about rushing, for speed often breeds carelessness, but about steady, relentless progress, about moving forward even if only one small step at a time, because small, consistent steps over time achieve more than bursts of effort that quickly fade. And finishing requires focus, for distractions will always come, opportunities that look easier, temptations that promise quicker gratification, fears that warn you of failure. But the finisher learns to keep his eyes fixed, his heart steady, and his mind firm. And finishing also requires resilience, because setbacks are certain, mistakes are inevitable, and failures are part of the process. But the finisher learns not to let these things define him, instead using them as lessons, as fuel, as sharpening stones that prepare him for the end. And finishing demands discipline, because feelings cannot be trusted to carry you through, and moods shift like the wind. But discipline builds habits, and habits keep you moving even when feelings have fled. And finishing is also about responsibility, because when you start something you create expectations in yourself, in others, and sometimes in those who depend on you. And to leave it undone is to betray that trust, but to finish is to honor both yourself and those around you. And finishing gives a satisfaction that nothing else can give, a deep fulfillment that cannot be bought or borrowed, because there is no joy like the joy of completing what you set out to do, no peace like the peace of knowing you kept your word, and no honor like the honor of staying faithful until the very end. And finishing does not mean every effort will lead to worldly success, because sometimes you finish and the world does not applaud. Sometimes you finish and the results seem small, but even then, the act of finishing shapes you, grows you, and proves your character. And sometimes finishing is more about who you become than what you gain, because finishing transforms you into someone reliable, someone steadfast, someone who does not give up when life grows hard. And finishing often inspires others, because when people see someone go all the way, it awakens something in them. It shows them that perseverance is possible, that endurance can lead to victory, that hope can be sustained through hardship. And finishing is the ultimate defense against regret, because regret is born not of failure but of unfinished potential, of roads abandoned too soon, of dreams left unpursued. But when you finish, even if imperfectly, you silence the voice of regret, because you gave your all and saw it through, And finishing is spiritual, because life itself is a race set before us, and each person must decide whether to run it faithfully. And history remembers finishers, because finishing is rare, and rarity makes it precious. And so the call of life, the call of discipline, the call of this very book is simple yet profound. Never start what you cannot finish. And if you do start, resolve in your heart to finish. Because finishing is not just the end of the task, it is the shaping of your destiny, the writing of your story, the building of your character, and the defining of your legacy. And when you finish, you prove to yourself that you are stronger than doubt, greater than fear, and more persistent than the obstacles in your way. And so, commit yourself to be a finisher, to honor every beginning with an end, to chase every vision to its completion, to turn every promise into fulfillment. Because finishing is greatness, finishing is honor, finishing is victory, and in finishing, your life finds its true meaning.